Hello there, welcome to the new. Sorry about this slight delay. We're still finishing things off here. Well, this is a bunch of videos for this week. I've got an idea for next week's video, which might be a bit different from normal, but we'll see how it goes. It's like I've got it kind of planned, but it just needs to. You know what life's like. It's like everything should go well next week for something a bit different from what we normally do. But it's hopefully it'll come together. Because I hope it'll be fun. But this week is just normal stuff. You know, a bunch of videos. The first one of which is Wyatt Earp Films. Which, as you can see in my background, I've got the Wyatt Earp versus the Clanton gang. That's been done in so many films before. So it's hopefully exciting to you as a possibility for a good video for how this story's been used so many times, but differently. Because I'm going to cover 5 films, and the 5 films go from My Darling Clementine, which is a very, idealistic film. Then it goes to Gunfight, Corral. Then it goes to Doc, which is very cynical. Then Tombstone, which is a bit more idealistic. And then finally Wyatt Earp, which is pretty dark. So there's some films that are on the idealistic side, some films that are on the darker side. And the big problem with Wyatt Earp's story is it's a story told later by Wyatt Earp when he was much later in life, when he knew a lot of movie stars. So the stories were made to make him look really good and made to make everyone else look worse. So how true the stories actually were, we don't know. We really don't know how close to life the stories actually are, and how we should take them. Should we take them as being, to be an amazing story of right versus wrong, or is it much more complicated? Because Westerns tend to try and have this idea of it's right versus wrong. But they're taking place at a time where there's a lot of expansion, a lot of land being bought over by America from in the West Coast. There's a lot of dubiousness going on. There's lots of land rights and haggling and over stuff that would become very important over time to whoever won it. Would basically mean their families would do well over time, and whoever lost it would have hard times ahead. So there's a lot of violence. There's also a lot of stuff there that was worked out through the law. So it's never quite as simplistic as a Western would tell you. Western's like a very simplistic version of life there. It's not the reality. In the West, you had different types of lawmen. You had marshals, you had sheriffs for the county, you had town sheriffs, you had all sorts of things. The marshals had their own area they could cover. You had different types of laws you could cover. You had mayors, you had everything, the normal legal infrastructure. You had cowboys traveling all their cattle from one place to the other so the cattle can be turned into food. You had a lot of people there that were, very, wild men. There's also the fact is, and it's been pointed out, like, bullets cost a lot of money. So, and a lot of Westerns are shooting here, there, and everywhere, and it costs a lot of money if you're actually doing that in real life. So it's because this was an industrial thing that actually took a lot to actually get produced. So everyone a lot of building guns, but to really fire the guns, you'd have to have a reason to do it. So it probably wasn't going to happen as people thought. There's probably more legal ramifications than you thought. But Hollywood took that idea of the West, the untamed land, and created a myth out of it. And that's what the thing is. John Ford thing was between the truth and the legend, printing the legend. That's kind of what the Western became, the legend. But the thing is, because it was such a interesting time, you could start with the most simplistic version of it and yet could mutate over time from being simplistic, where the people and the lawmen, everyone else was just trying to go on with their lives, to make it more psychological in the 50s, to make it more cynical in the 60s, spaghetti westerns, and become very revisionist in the 70s. There was a lot there. It was one of those situations where there was a lot you could do with it, because it wasn't just black and white the way it originally was presented to you. You did feel the Indians coming through as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the West that allowed for reinterpretation, allowed for stories to be retold again, again, again. And some people liked certain areas and other people like other areas. Like there's a lot of people who like the more traditional westerns do not like the spaghetti westerns, because spaghetti westerns came from Italy, shot in Spain, and were very cynical because this was my culture had just survived fascism, you know, and had a lot of very cynical views on capitalism, what it was about. There's a lot of communists there. And they weren't really keen the 70s revisionist movies either, like Heaven's Gate or The Wild Bunch, because that did not present a future for the West. It just showed the West has been, a lot of the Western people been old and out of touch and fairly psychotic. They'd much prefer My Darling Clementine. There's other people who look at My Darling Clementine and stuff like that. There's hopefully idealistic. Life's not like that. That is just a legend thing. And you can appreciate it, but it's not what life is. So you have that. You have the different camps, you know. Like, it's just one of those things. It's like Lawrence Kasdan, who made the Wyatt Ear film, I read the book, the screenplay book, where it was obvious he was in the camp of, he loved everything up to the early 60s and then not so keen on spaghetti westerns. But then again, spaghetti westerns did a lot of really interesting films. And there was a lot of interesting films in the 60s that led to spaghetti western, like The Professionals and things like that, which were a lot more, I'll look at the cynical side of things as we get into the 60s and realize the institutions that were viewed of as great in the 40s and 50s might be a bit dodgy. So the complexity of the West actually reveled the complexity of life as it evolved in America. So it is tied to the American tale. So I'm covering these 5 films that are all distinctively different and all have their pluses and minuses. I mean, I would say straight away, I like all of these films. I like Wyatt Earp's story, Loki Corral story. I do like that one. It's one of those ones I'm a sucker to go and watch. If there's a new version, I'll probably go and watch it. And I'll be happy to see the different takes on the story. Because personally, I think that Wyatt Earp is probably a fairly average lawman in a sense of he was a type of lawman that existed there at the time in the 1880s. A lot of people had to be really violent to actually stop these hordes of cowboys who were much more violent than the era could take. Like, I don't think he was anything special for the type of law he was doing. He was probably very good at his job, but he was also trying to be a capitalist, and all those ventures failed. But he was a typical man of that time that was coming off this post-Civil War, trying to make something of the country, trying to make something of their lives, and finding there was a lot more difficult than he thought. And I think he could be a bullshit artist as he went on. A lot of these films present his wife as something pure. He's different marriages, and his eventual wife, who lived for years, were very, very pure. And then we did the biography stuff. It's like, no, she was a gambling addict, and she had a lot of problems. So it's one of those things that and they both had affairs after they met, and he had another wife that he mistreated, and so there's a lot of stuff there where the legend was presented early, and then the facts came out later on of what was going on. And it's just a typical life, like a complicated life. And as he went into the movie business, obviously he presented his life as being a lot more pure than it probably was. And probably he was less of a good guy, and there's probably more areas of grey. But then again, the Clantons are probably, who are all thinking the villains, but are probably not the nicest of people either. You know, I suspect it was pretty much they were the law, dealing with these outlaw types who had some legal defense, and shit happened. And that's it. That's just the way life went. You know, I don't think it was black and white, but I don't think it was any of the tellings of it are egregiously like I don't think the Clantons were innocent in any possible way. And each telling has a different take of the Clantons as well as Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. And Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp's relationship was probably darker than we get in films because they did fall out at times. And you think, well, Wyatt Earp was so pure, why was one of his best friends a noted killer and gambler? Is like, probably wasn't as pure as he said he was, but in those probably a lot of complicated relationships going on of different people who get on. You know, it's just one of those things that you find out in life as life's more interesting than a simplistic tale can ever manage. So it's probably one of those situations where it was complicated, and the earlier versions probably simplified it. But to be fair to all versions of the story, is the Wyatt Earp Doc Holliday relationship is always the most interesting part of them because there is a sense of undertone to it that there's more there than we can really get at. I don't quite know all of it, but there's something interesting there. So I'll go to the films now after this massively long introduction. Right, the first one is My Darling Clementine, which is the famous one from John Ford. Now, John Ford did not want to make the film, apparently. He owed the studio a film, and there'd already been Frontier Marshal with Wyatt Earp a few years before, and he used some of the similar material, similar source of the biography of Wyatt Earp, and he had known Wyatt Earp when Wyatt Earp was in Hollywood. But then when he got the assignment, he actually made the best of it. But the film was finished, and then I can't remember who the studio head was who supervised it, said, "This is good. There's some great scenes, but there's some stuff that needs fixed." Ford didn't agree, and someone else finished the film, and the film came out and was viewed as a masterpiece. I don't think it's a masterpiece. I think the first half of the film is wonderful. Then it goes into melodrama for a bit, and then it comes out strong at the end. And I get a sense I get what the studio head was talking about. Like, there's lots of really good stuff. This is a film about the characters and the mood rather than the plot. When it has to do the plot to get from characters from A to B, that's where it gets a bit clumsy and soap opera-ish. When it's just hanging out with Wyatt Earp and his brothers and Doc Holliday, that's where it's more strong. The atmosphere of the town, the wonderful moments like Henry Fonda as Wyatt Earp as he's just hanging back in a chair and balancing himself, things like that. A lot of simple things, a lot of sense of what Doc Holliday is about, how he doesn't think much of himself. And that's when they make Doc Holliday an actual doctor rather than a dentist, who's really a dentist. And Victor Ventura plays him, he's very good, but he's probably the least distinctive Doc Holliday when you look at all the other ones. He's not that thin, and Doc Holliday was dying of tuberculosis. But he does have an interesting feel to him. He does feel like he's a messed up character. And even here at the start, this is where Doc Holliday tends to steal the films. You know, it's just the way it is. He's a more interesting character. He always steals the films. This one is probably closest to the balance, though, because in this one, because Henry Fonda's playing Wyatt Earp, he managed to do the dignity of Wyatt Earp so well that he really keeps the film from becoming a Doc Holliday story. And there's some wonderful stuff, early stuff with Wyatt Earp meeting Doc Holliday. There's early stuff with Wyatt Earp being a cowhand who's getting his cows from one place to the other, which never happened in real life. He never did that. He did a lot of money stuff, things to make money outside of the law, but being a cowboy wasn't one of them. He tried to invest in mines and things like that. And he and his brother got up to all sorts of stuff. And, you know, and he get dissed a lot in Deadwood. There's a Deadwood episode where Wyatt Earp comes up, drives in Deadwood, because he did go to Deadwood and he gets dissed. But in this one, his car gets stolen by the Clantons. he becomes, because he's a lawman, he becomes a marshal to take down the Clantons, and that's what he's there for. And in between there, he meets up with Doc Holliday. Doc Holliday's old girlfriend, Clementine, arrives from the east, trying to find out what happened to Doc. She sees how much of a wreck he is, and having Wyatt start to form some sort of affection for each other. All this setup is great. I mean, the setup of Doc Holliday is great. The setup of the women coming in and Wyatt having a thing for her is great. It's done really slowly, really carefully. And then at a certain point, the melodrama kicks in. But 2/3 of the way through, suddenly the Mexican woman who's with Doc Holliday suddenly gets really jealous and irrational, and Doc Holliday's set up as someone who's going to who killed people, and it turns out that wasn't the case. Because they make Wyatt think that Doc Holliday killed his brother, stole his cattle. They find out that's not the case. There's a big chase sequence. And watching this sequence, I was thinking, okay, that's not what the end of the story is going to be. So I'm bored because I know this is bullshit. And that's the section that just annoyed me. It was like, there's a whole 20 minutes as we're going towards the end of the film that just, to me, goes off the rails completely and just annoys me. And it's so annoying because the first 40, 50 minutes of the film is wonderful. Everything's just great. You can easily relax and watch the film again and again. And then suddenly this plot twist comes and it's like, this is painfully bad. This is what happened. Eventually they figure it out, they get together and they go and defeat the Clantons. Walter Brennan is the chief of the Clantons. It's not Ike Clanton. He's great. Normally he plays a nicer guy, but he gets to play a villain. And he's great because he's just a bastard. And you want to see him killed. And all the villains are good. The brothers of Wyatt Earp are all different from the reality. I mean, the funny thing about this film is the ones who died in real life survive, and the ones who survived in real life die in this film. It's like it gets the history completely wrong. Like it makes the eldest brother, the youngest brother who dies instantly, it makes the older brother younger than the middle brother. And it's like everything's all wrong with the brothers. It's because every other film kind of gets it right. But this one just gets it completely wrong. So that's another weirdness to the film. But it is a wonderful film. It does work really well. It's just that there's 20 minutes near the end that just goes completely off the rails for me. It just annoys me because it's like, this was going so well. I remember not liking the film that much. And I was watching, I didn't know like this film. And then we got to the last that 20-minute gap, and I was like, oh yes, this is why I didn't like the film, is this section. And in my head, that inflated as though the whole film more than 20 minutes, but I hadn't seen it for so long. So Darling Clementine's a wonderful film. It's got a section that's not good. Now we go on to the Gunfight the OK Corral, which is probably the first Wyatt Earp film I saw on TV. It's probably one most people saw first, really, if you're a certain age. And then if you're a bit younger, Tombstone's probably the first Wyatt Earp film you saw. Like, these are the Tombstone and this are the more commercialized, they're the more, the films that are part of the legend of Wyatt Earp, and they're not as psychological, they're not as interesting, but they do work as adventure stories. They do work really well. It's like they just feel less. I mean, this one feels less artistic than My Darling Clementine, but it doesn't have the flaws of My Darling Clementine, and it does have a better Wyatt Earp Doc Holliday relationship. It's clearer. This is probably a template for where they're going to go with it in future films. I think a lot of people were coming from this one for the later Wyatt Earp films. And it's really fun because Kirk Douglas chooses scenery as Doc Holliday. He's having a lot of fun. He's really interesting. And Burt Lancaster is Wyatt Earp. works really well. He's really good. But he's nicknamed the Preacher by Doc Holliday because he is a man of rules and a man of law. And a lot of the early part of the film is really about these two meeting up. It's about Wyatt chasing a felon, meeting up with Doc Holliday for information. It's the relationship between them where Doc Holliday would not give him the information, then Wyatt saves his life. And slowly a bond develops over time between them. And it's about that bond rather than being about the gunfight. The gunfight's the aftermath. This started with John Sturges, who did The Great Escape and Magnificent Seven. And he also did another Wyatt Earp story, Hour of the Gun, which I never had a chance to see for this video, but I have seen it before, and I liked it better than the gunfight because it's about the hunt for the Clattons after the gunfight, after they basically killed one of Wyatt Earp's brothers. But I don't have a chance to see it. But this one is really about the relationship between Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp. That's what it feels the focus of everybody in it. So other characters come in, like Ike Clanton comes in, Johnny Ringo comes in. You had John Ireland in the second film with Wyatt Earp film because he was in My Darling Clementine as well. This time he's playing Johnny Ringo, who's one of the Clanton's, gunmen. This one has less of My Darling Clementine had a distinctive Clanton villain and Old Man Clanton. This one you've got Ike Clanton and some other ones. But the person you remember most is Dennis Hopper because we know who Dennis Hopper is. And he plays a young innocent kid who's Billy Clanton. And he's he's the one that Wyatt tries to get away from this life of criminality. And he's doomed, but you try and help him. There's lots of nice moments, but it is a film that does that thing that certain American films do, that it's going to go so far into the subtext of anything. It's neat and clean. Wyatt Earp has his problems. You see him meeting his wife and dealing with her, and the relationship developing. Then he has to go and help his brothers at Tombstone against the Clattons. They break up, and it suggests they'll get back together afterwards. So the romance thing there works well as well. You have Big Nose Kate, who's Doc Holliday's girl, who you first get to see in this film. And there's a lot of really cool stuff in this film. It's really enjoyable. If you want a Wyatt Earp film, it's really enjoyable and painless. This is it. It's not the most distinctive one, but it probably is the most entertaining one. And yeah, I've watched it way too many times in the past. So, yeah, when I say that, I don't mean it in a bad way. I actually mean it, and it's really entertaining. It's just, it's not a film you want to go for depth. It's meant as an entertaining film. That's what it's aimed at. It succeeds. So, that's just one of those things. This is a big Hollywood movie with Wyatt Earp, really. There was other Wyatt Earp films or small films about it, but nothing really came about till Doc in 1970. Stars Stacey Keach's Doc Holliday. You'd Harris Yulin as Wyatt Earp, and this is well into revisionist filmmaking. This is basically when they were making films about how horrible the West actually was, how most of your myths were lies, and how everybody who you thought were the lawmen were actually out for themselves. And this is the first one into the politics of Wyatt Earp. The historical politics of Wyatt Earp actually lost an election for sheriff, and he wanted to be sheriff. There's another guy, Johnny Behan, who's a sheriff, and he's usually portrayed in most of the later Wyatt Earp films as a stooge for the Clantons. And this one, he's portrayed as someone who's decent, but is being slandered by Wyatt Earp. So it depends what side you take, really, because we don't know. Was he been slandered historically, or was he really like that? We don't know. We never know. That's the past. Everyone's dead, so you never get a good idea. And just trying to get a consensus opinion of anybody, even nowadays, when they're still alive. So this one is really about Doc Holliday. He goes to Tombstone after Wyatt Earp's gone there, and the first 20 minutes is him going through a sandstorm and going to this area, this barn, this little hovel. It's more like a barn with beer, where he plays Ike Clanton a hand of cards and beats him. And this is where he first beats Faye Dunaway's character, who's basically Big Nose Cape. She's not called that. And basically, they start a romance in this thing, and he's got tuberculosis, and so the first section is them not getting on, arguing with each other a lot, and getting to Tombstone. Then, as the film goes on, it's about him and her. She actually wants to find a future because she basically came from nothing. Her mother was a prostitute. This is the only life she's got, but she's trying to move on with her life and try and move up in the society and maybe move beyond where she was. Well, Doc is a good gambler, makes lots of money, and because he is successful, Wyatt Earp basically wants him, when he becomes sheriff, to run the gambling outfit in Tombstone, and Wyatt Earp will run the law, and they'll make a lot of money. That's why Wyatt Earp in this film wants to become the sheriff. He wants to basically take over the rackets of the town, of a growing town, and actually be in charge. Which is and he is a total psycho in this film. He is just terrible. He's a coward, and he's petty, and he's just everything. Like, he's basically the personification of all the worst legends about Wyatt Earp in one thing, one guy. He's just horrible. And Doc Holliday is starting to get sick of him, get sick of his cowardness, get sick of being used. And it's just like this idea of this town is this kind of attitude that Wyatt Earp has, and a bunch of other people that the Clantons have, is generating these next generation of people who are just as bad, who are interested in the bastard gunmen and all the rest of it, and have no real sense of the future. It's just like, grab what you can get, screw over everybody. No one has any dignity. It's that kind of film, revisionist 70s film. It's wonderful. I mean, it's definitely. I like this one a lot better than My Darling Clementine. Even though My Darling Clementine is much prettier, this one's more soulful. You get a sense of Doc Holliday as a killer who doesn't particularly like it anymore. And he probably never did. He was just thrown into the West because for a medical condition, to survive. And he's just someone who likes to read and likes to think. And there's nothing around here to actually engage him. So this is where you get Stacey Keach, who's one of those actors who was always underrated. It was a real run here. They did this in New Centurions and Fat City, fairly close together. And at that time, Stacey Keach was a very soulful actor. He was very sensitive but macho at the same time. Like he could play the kind of tough guy, but also there was a softness beneath. Like within this time, they were thinking of him for Damien Carrison and The Exorcist. If you watch these films, you can see why. He does have that soulfulness to him. You never get the part, but he is really interesting. And he gives Doc less affectations than other portrayals give him. He's less showy, but it's much more of a guy who's not the legend. Is a guy whose actions create the legend, but he's not really that. And the guys playing Wyatt Earp's his brothers, they're just as bad as the Clantons. Are just scumbags who have no dignity. And Wyatt Earp himself is just a horrible person in this film. It's wonderful, but it's very much, if you like My Darling Clementine, this film is probably not for you. You know, or if you like that Darling Clementine and adore it and put it up there as something amazing, this film's probably not for you. But it's probably more honest about the way things worked in the West than My Darling Clementine. You know, it's probably got the kind of some of the background maneuvers down probably clearer. even though it airs in the same cynicism in the sense that there may have been some of this, but also some other things going on. It does go to the most cynical view of everyone's interactions in this film, which there's a place for that. So we moved beyond the revisionist stuff, and now, like 20 years later, we got two more Wyatt Earp films, and they were very different from each other. And one was a hit, and one was not. Now, the hit was Tombstone. It has become a big film for a lot of people about Wyatt Earp's story, and it has become like a film that a lot of people go to. And there's Wyatt Earp itself as a film, which is a film I really like, but no one else seems to touch it. Now, Tombstone had a very difficult production process. The director, who's also the writer, was fired fairly early on. And George Matos was brought in to direct and basically put the film together because the film was already in production. Like, choices have been made for costume, for cast, for everything. It was like, just keep shooting and get this thing done. And I think there is a sense of there was a more ambitious film planned. There were some scenes cut out, apparently. And so what you got was a film that isn't always coherent. There's certain things where you have to you get a montage instead of what should be a sequence. You know, there's lots of that in the film. But where the film succeeds is it's cast. It's really well cast. Even if the cast has not been asked to bring their A game, they do enough to keep it going. And some of them are ridiculously over the top. But they're not been directed. You can tell they're not been directed because nobody's acting style connects with another person's acting style. Some people are going ridiculously insane with the performance. Other people are much more restrained. And it's like there's no director planning out like this performance matches this performance here. This goes here. This design has to match what the actors are doing, so we have to be careful there. None of that. We just shoot it in front of the screen and see what happens. But the actors are so much fun, and they're just having a ball that doesn't matter. So basically, three people actually are there's three people. Oops. Yeah. That's too. My brain couldn't take that. So there's three people who keep this film on the rails as actors. I mean, the first one's Kurt Russell as Wyatt Earp. Now, he had basically to try and keep this film afloat. From what everyone said, he was the one keeping it afloat because he was pushing it forward even when a disaster would happen left, right, and centre. And even though apparently wasn't very happy with his own performance because he never had a chance to really do it because he was so busy on the production and trying to keep it going, he does bring a energy that Kurt Russell has in a lot of his films that keeps this thing on track. So even if you're jumping from one scene to another that you're thinking, there should be more here, his energy keeps it going all the time. And I don't think it's appreciated how much he keeps this film going, how much energy he has that keeps this film on the rails. And so, because the film jumps left, right, and centre, because it's a slow setup, and suddenly a lot of stuff happens, and we're going from the setup that takes forever to suddenly we're going towards the OK Corral. Then finally, you've got the manhunt after OK Corral, and all these things are happening all over the place. And you know, Kurt Russell keeps it together, even when you know there's scenes missing that would have made sense of a lot of this stuff. The other person, one of the other people who keeps it online is Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday. The funny thing is, when we watched this film, is I forgot how little he's actually in the film. He's in it, but he's not in it like every scene. He's in it the way Doc Holliday's in these films, where he comes in and he leaves for a bit, and it's really a Wyatt Earp story. But he's so good and so interesting and so different and weird playing Doc Holliday that you always go to him. He's always fun. He's always a danger. And he's always interesting. So it's like, I saw a review that was actually really accurate. It said, I'd have loved to have seen the film that was playing Val Kilmer's head making Tombstone because it's more interesting than the film we actually got. And that you do feel that watching that film is like the thing he's doing is much more interesting than the rest of the film, but it's just so much fun to watch. It's because Val Kilmer's one of those actors that he gets bored really easily in the leading man performances. But give him a weird character part and he's happy and he'll go off and do crazy stuff that's wonderful. But it's just the leading men stuff that's they just never seem to catch his imagination. He's kind of like Ali Baldwin that way, who's also an actor in the 90s was told you're the next leading man, and then it was like didn't really work because he's more a character actor than leading man. It's that kind of thing. Finally, Michael Biehn, Johnny Ringo, who's I think even less than Doc Holliday, because him and Holliday have a rivalry, and he's always the threat that floats through the background of all these scenes. He's always the one who's a dangerous one who could kill anybody. So it's his threats. He's almost like the Dracula of this film, in the sense of you don't always see him, but he's kind of there always. So you've got a lot of other actors like Michael Rooker and Powers Booth who are going way over the top in fun ways, but it means they're not threats when you're watching the film. But Michael Biehn is a threat. He's always a threat. He's always a dangerous person in the film, which again keeps the danger up. So when you're losing a lot of the scenes, there's always a sense of it doesn't matter because there's a danger's always there. So these three keep this thing going, and especially when they're in scenes together, there's always a sense of danger. So that even as other scenes kind of come up and down, and there's certain massive gaps where you think there should be a subplot, these three actors keep it going. Plus, there's other actors in there who are good, but they're dealing with some weird material and a director who's not really directing them. So, yeah, it's a strange film. It's really entertaining, but it's not particularly good at the same time. It's like there's so many holes you can pick in, a lot of decisions that they made in this film. I mean, you've got actors like Sam Elliott and Bill Paxton as the Earp brothers. Again, they're fun, but they're not really given that much to do. I mean, they're not given, the scenes are given, it's like they're better actors than what they've been given, and they make what they're given work. But it's like, you do wish they'd given these actors better material. So it's that kind of weird film that's kind of, it's so far better than it should be. And it's just because it was set up right. And again, there was stuff in the script that was interesting. The idea the cowboys were basically the gangsters of the time, and there's a big rollover of people, of lawmen as well, try to corral everything. And there's lots of interesting stuff going on, and the different fashions going through Tombstone at the time, and how the West was just growing in crazy ways. Because, I mean, the West was pretty much, this film was basically made like 100 years after the events, and the world had completely changed. So this was the West changing, going from being a wasteland to something more urban. There's all that stuff going on, but then it gets just abandoned. In a sense of the film the original director wanted to make was probably much more ambitious. And finally going to Wyatt Earp, which was the ambitious film that actually got made. And I'm sure the studio hated it when they saw it because it was everything Tombstone wasn't. Instead of having a lively Wyatt Earp, you had a depressed Wyatt Earp for a lot of the film. Instead of being an upbeat film where Wyatt Earp comes out on top and beats the villains who killed his brother, this one is a bit of psychological breakdown of a guy who's slowly going mad and turning himself, and someone who needs the OK Corral psychologically. It's the corrosive aspect of violence on a person's soul and what it does to them. So it's downbeat, it's violence, but the violence is never done as if it's cool. The violence is always shown as something horrible that you don't want to do. And it's something that will corrode your soul. And it's something that's an industry where people make a lot of money off it because that's what's needed at the time. And it shows you that this time period is where there's lots of industries like that. The railroad industry is pretty brutal. There's lots of bandits trying to steal the payrolls. You've got the buffalo hunt sequences in this one. You've got lots of horrible action taking place. All the characters are much more downbeat. The film lasts for 3 hours, and it takes a long time to actually get to Tombstone for the OK Corral. And OK Corral is over pretty quickly. And it's 3 hours long, but it's a film also could have done for an extra 20 minutes because they cut stuff out. Because I read the script beforehand. They cut stuff out that would really have helped this film just to get from A to B to. Because there's some pacing issues in the second half that I'm sure they'll just try to cut the film down, but they took out a couple of scenes that would have given a bit of smoothness to some of the storytelling that would have helped a lot. So it's like you have 3 hours in anyway. What's now 10 minutes, 20 minutes going to do for the film? So the film is basically about the kind of rise of Wyatt Earp from being a child to being the guy who is going to have that gunfight at OK Corral. And mainly it's about, okay, what created these lawmen, what created these violent lawmen? Like, why did they go like this? What was the psychological process of becoming a lawman at this time? So it's a serious film of what creates someone like Wyatt Earp. And, you know, what are the flaws in him and what are the flaws in his kind of character. So it shows you he comes from a father who's a lawyer, who roams around a lot, who likes to do challenges, and who's strict but not insane, but he's got a kind of sense of himself that's beyond what other people think. Like, he's always a step outside of the mainstream. And he's played by Gene Hackman, who's really good in the film. And he's got a lot of speeches that could have come across as really dodgy if, you know, Gene Hackman doing them. Because he sells it, the sense of this is a guy who doesn't really think about how he comes across to other people. This is a guy who just says what he thinks. And he doesn't really care if it's, you know, he'd be seen as a bit square or a bit weird. He doesn't care. So you get a sense of a strong upbringing and a family that's always moving. So Wyatt Earp never has roots. So as he moves west and finally loves the West and loves seeing land that's never been touched before, he creates a kind of wanderlust in him. Like, he's just always more comfortable moving. He doesn't like getting trapped with people in a certain location for too long. And it also lets him see that a lot of the people in this environment are really violent and really very uneducated and very destructive. And his father most tells him, like, when something of this happens, you know, just shoot to kill. It's the only way to survive here. And he learns that the hard way. So, but before he becomes a lawman, he becomes a husband. There's somebody he met when he was younger. He goes back and he actually courts her and marries her. Then she dies of a disease. He gets totally takes him out of his any kind of plan for the future, and becomes suicidal. He's basically trying to make someone shoot him. His father gets him out of it and forces him to go west again and try and find his footing. And there you slowly see him work his way towards being who he become, basically, which is this lawman who doesn't take any guff from anybody. So it's a slow process. It really is a slow process of you first see him doing a buffalo hunt. Then you see where it says just defenses animals. It's quite easy to do. Then you see him move on. He meets some people that will come up later in the film, and you see him going to Dodge City, and that's because he helps defeat someone who's gone crazy. The law there sees him as someone who's actually useful with his hands, and he becomes a lawman. And he's got that quick to violence attitude. No one will mess with him. It's like, we don't want to deal with that psycho. He'll beat the hell out of you. So he believes in the law, but he's got all these demons in him, like, that have been brought out from the environment he's in, which is very violent, from his own traumas, from his wife dying, and his reaction to that. And a lot of innate characteristics you see slowly emerge, like he's judgmental of people who would resort to violence quickly. He thinks he's better than them, and he's a disdain for them, so he doesn't have any problem beating the hell out of them. And it's a slow progression of that kind of desire to be basically God within his area of being a guy no one will mess with. But also, he wants more from life. He wants to be a businessman rather than a lawman, because you don't make money as a lawman. So you've got those twin ambitions slowly, and he slowly becomes the person who dominates his own family. So family with him becomes something that's important. Like he brings his brothers together to do something in Tombstone, to actually build something for themselves. And it's just about the kind of psychopathology of this guy who starts out innocent and ends up really screwed up by his environment and by his own demons. And someone who can't see beyond his actions to see what's driving him, that leads him towards a situation where he can't not clash with the Clantons when he finally goes against them. Like, even though he's doing well enough in his own business, he doesn't need to deal with the clans, because he's got that kind of mental quality to him and that anger to him, he has to deal with them. And that just leads to tragedy, and leads to his own brother being killed, and leads to violence as he hunts down and murders the people who mess with him. So it's a fairly psychopathic Wyatt Earp in some ways, but it's a very human Wyatt Earp at the same time. He does fall in love with his wife, the woman who'll be his wife for years. Later in the film, he does slowly come back towards humanity again, slowly but surely. At that point, he's caused a lot of havoc, and he's very too far into that sort of mindset. So there will be violence, that situation. But it is the kind of thing of the build towards the violent confrontation, and then trying to slowly back away and other things in life. And how do you back away, really? And can you back away? Can your own demons make you back away? So it's a really interesting film, but it is a long film. It really is a long film. And I think one of the big problems is actually it needed those other 20 minutes, because I think there was little bits in the script that actually, it's one of those things, if sometimes you take something out of a film, it makes it longer. It makes it feel longer because you're missing something and you feel there's something missing. And that's what this film has. The sense of there's bits missing that would have made the story more coherent and made it much easier to watch. And it is because they wrote it, they shot it, they didn't put in the film because the running time. And it is a shame, because there was a lot of really good stuff. And I think the idea this film felt long just killed it commercially and critically. It got murdered critically and commercially. It just was meant to be a big Oscar film, and it just came out and died. And it's a real shame. I mean, Dennis Quaid as Doc Holliday is great. He's just a skinny, brutal, funny as hell character who is just basically waiting to die, and has no he doesn't really have any compunction to be loyal to anybody until someone becomes a friend, and then he's loyal to them. So he's loyal to Wyatt because Wyatt's his pal, but he's not loyal to anyone else. And he hates the Clantons. And there's just this sense of he's just this kind of the angel of death hanging over everybody. But not in that kind of overdone way, just this presence almost bringing death to everybody. And Costner's actually good as Wyatt Earp. He got a bad press for his performance because he's playing someone who's repressed, violent, damaged, and who doesn't express himself very much as he goes on in life. It's like, that's not a performance that's actually going to get much praise, because if you do it properly, people are going to say, well, you're pretty flat. It's like, yeah, that's what those people are like. It's just that's what that kind of person's like. So it's It's promise I like a lot. For me, it's one of his better performances, but it did not get much praise because people prefer the more romantic Wyatt Earp. The darker ones like Costner's or Harvey Shulins are the ones that don't get the praise because it's like someone they're not comfortable with. This character they thought was a great lawman of the West could have actually been a bit more psychopathic than they want to think of it. So that's that film. It's a really interesting film. You may need some patience for it, but it is worth it. So yeah, that's 5 Wyatt Earp films. There are more, but those are the 5 I think that are worth looking at because they're all different takes on Wyatt Earp, and they've all got their good points, they've all got their bad points. There's not that one perfect version of this story. Everyone has its flaws, but I like the darker ones more. But I like the lighter ones too. So it's like I just like these stories, but each one of them I know there's some imperfections in the storytelling. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It went on a lot longer than I planned, but it's just there's quite a lot to say about it. So I'll see you later. So that's me for now. Bye.